Let's just start with your journey, Kate. How did you get into the sync side of music, music supervision, all of that?
Well, I was really into music in high school. I thought I wanted to be a singer. And then I went to music school and was like, no. But the business side was really interesting to me. I like the promotion of music and protecting artists and writers. And I interned for a music supervisor in Los Angeles while I was in school, Frankie Pine and Don Soler and Tony Von Pervier. They're amazing music supervisors. And right out of that internship, they offered me a job with them. So I was with Whirly Girl with Frankie for many years doing film and TV. Then I went over to the other side. We call it the other side. The supervision side is more like the buyer. And then when you're on the other side, you're actually sending the music to the music supervisors to place in their projects. So it's more of a sales, I guess, quote unquote, if you wanted to like dwindle it down into descriptives. So I went to the other side for 2 years in management, publishing, and label. And then a good friend of mine that I had done a TV show with called Brothers and Sisters, which really ages me if anybody remembers that show.
I think I vaguely remember that.
Yeah. Frankie, Robin Erding, and Sanaz Levadian, we did that show. And Sanaz was in trailers. So any kind of like entertainment marketing. So it would be like any series you see, like we were talking about The Americans, things like that. We would do the full advertising campaigns for them. Or big movies like Finding Dory. Or I did a lot of live action Disney, reimaginations, all those things. So she brought me over to the trailer side of supervision, which is very different than film and TV. And so I was with her at an agency called Motion for, again, many years. I think about I don't remember, actually. And then I went over to head up the music supervision department at Seismic, which is also an entertainment marketing agency in Los Angeles. For about 7 years I was there. And then we moved to Nashville, and I came back to the other side.
Well, I love it. And you've touched so many sides of the sync business. Was there a certain area of it that you kind of knew that you wanted to be in? Or was it just like kind of you get an opportunity, you walk through the door? I mean, did you kind of have an understanding of how the whole space worked in the beginning?
In the beginning, I really didn't. To be honest with you, when I was in school, I didn't even really know supervision was a job. It was... Maybe
double click on that real quick, just for people who don't know. Can you explain that job of a music supervisor?
So depending on the media you're in, like if you're, for example, if you're on a TV show, you're hired on the TV show as the music supervisor, meaning you contribute to the creative in terms of the music choices. You are literally like the first filter for all the music out there in the world to get to your producers, your editors, your showrunners, your directors. A lot of times it's very collaborative with editors, with producers, with people involved in the project. It's never just like a one-man show, but you're there to facilitate all their musical needs. Their clearance, 9 times out of 10, is handled by the music supervisor, if not handled by the in-studio music team. So you're there to advise on budget, legalities, negotiations, options. You go through a series of cuts. You're in on spotting sessions. You're involved with the composers. If you're on the advertising side, if you're in like entertainment marketing like I was, you have a client at the studio, and then you have editors at your vendor. You're working with your editors, your producers, your creative directors, and you're there facilitating everything, like custom compositions, huge recording artists, all those sorts of things. You're essentially like their music agent in a lot of ways.
You're kind of quarterbacking the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You've had experience from, like you're saying, the advertising side, but also trailers and all of that. There's a lot of different lanes, and you touched on pretty much all of them in, maybe not video games. That's a whole nother one.
Yeah, that's a whole other one.
But there's trailers.
Yeah.
There's
there
advertising.
are video game trailers.
There are video game there are trailers. There are video game trailers. There's advertising. There's in-show.
Yeah.
There's promos.
There's promos. There's in-feature.
In-feature, yeah. So maybe talk about those different lanes and just kind of the different, maybe just explain what those are for people that maybe don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, in-show, you mean like what usually gets placed in show or how it goes?
Yeah. Kind of how it goes. Maybe just some of the different like quirks about how each of those lanes work. And because you've educated me a lot on just how trailers work. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize you had to do stuff like there's like a 3-part movement. You got to build stuff up. And
in trailers, you kind of have to think of it in terms of acts. Like you have an open, a middle, and a back end. And that can be carried by several cues. If it's a teaser, it can be carried by one cue. And you have to think about that in terms of like the open is usually more minimal. you're just getting introduced to the world that you're in. The middle is where you get more story. You're introduced to your characters. It picks up the pace. The back end is usually the big tease. It's like big building. There's tension. You learn stakes. You learn a lot more about, like, it's a lot more action heavy than the story portions of it. So for trailers specifically, you know, we love a big build. We love a different kind of production than it would be in film and TV 9 times out of 10. I keep using 9 times out of 10. But like, we've gone through this before and we've done stuff for promo or for trailers.
Yeah.
There's just, the production is slightly different. It's more of like that cinematic.
It's different
big,
sounds that you use. You even brought up a term called trailerize, like you can trailerize a song. And there are people that literally just do that, right? Like just the trailerization.
Yeah. I mean, they're also trailer composers, so they can do the full like orchestral cues that carry a picture. But knowing that structure and the way that trailers work, they're also incredibly good at remixing things.
Yeah.
We would remix we call it an overlay, when you like essentially add elements to a song to like beef it up, like strings, perk, brass.
Big hits.
Yeah.
And
Love a boom.
love the booms.
So those composers know, again, they know like how the structure of a trailer works. Like they need to have an open a certain way. They need to have a middle a certain way. They need to have breaks and acts and dynamics for an editor to work with. There has to be instrumental breaks. There has to be things for them to play with. So yes, there are composers that specialize specifically in trailerizing. Yeah.
So to contrast that with things like, okay, advertising and in-show and in feature, I mean, what is the difference with those? Is that more just taking a standard song that would work for a spot and they kind of chop it up as needed?
Yeah, I mean, traditional ads, like in terms of commercials, a lot of times that's reliant on something very recognizable. It's a little bit more subtle than trailers. And also, I think in ads, they give you a very short period of time to tell you how to feel. So you need to know, like, are we happy? Are we together? Is this family? Is this sentimental? Is this warm? Is this all those sorts of words? Because it's really like initial feeling for those sorts of placements. And familiarity is really a big part of. I don't do the pitching for ads at Sony necessarily all the time, unless it's one of our country artists. But I see our ad team, they love things that are like, they call them earworms, that are very, very catchy or have some sort of element that stands out that can be, again, like they can latch onto really quickly. And then in film and TV, it can be more subtle. There isn't as much, again, there's not a lot of trailerization or remixing in those circumstances. I do see crossover sometimes. I'll see songs that were written or produced more in the promo lane landing in TV more often these days for those big, you know, high stakes moments, montage moments or end titles or things like that. But there is room for, I would think, a little bit more subtlety in film and television. Again, we still love a big build. We love anything super emotive. The lyrics don't have to be as compacted. You can take more time with your lyrics. There's one supervisor said it more eloquently than I did. She said, sometimes when you think about it as a song having a bunch of furniture in the room, when you think about it for TV, take some of the furniture out because you're only going to get so many lyrics in when there's dialogue. So if you give them space to get a clear, very simple sort of repeated lyric every now and again, that can be really helpful just for editors.
Well, that's something that coming from the country world and in the Christian world where I came out of, like it's a lot of lyric. And so a lot of people and artists and writers in that space have a hard time understanding like, oh, you actually just, it's less words.
And it's also less
space.
Story. Because you have to think about it like it's serving a different story. These songs aren't talking about, like if you get too specific, it can take you out of the script, the actual episode or the movie because it's too much someone else's story. It's too narrative and it becomes hard to edit to complement that scene. So sometimes the broader the better. I say that hesitantly because I do think a lot of times we then lose some of the artistry and that's not the goal. But yes, with country can be very story. It can be very literal. There's lots of like personal things like names, cities, places, brands. And that can all be a little bit difficult.
Too specific.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that, because you hit on something that you've helped educate me over the past few years on this, but people don't really as much want a song that feels like it was written for sync. Mm-hmm. But there are the rules. How do you...
it's hard to get to.
When you're talking to an artist, how do you help them sort of thread that needle?
I think that the songs... And this is sort of niche unless you've really been in the industry for a while. The songs that are curated recently for sync, quote unquote, have a real place in the industry, but it's in promo mostly. Because, again, you have a pretty short time to tell them how to feel. They want lyrics that are like, tonight, come in, you're welcome, you never know what you're gonna get kind of thing. So they'll do like original content compilations of like series that are on a network, and they want to be able to hit all these different things, so they need a really broad lyric.
Yeah.
And they need it to be fun and punchy and all of those things. So those sort of like curated tracks, they do live pretty well in that world, but that is not all of sync.
Yeah.
Sync is many different things. So when it gets dwindled down to just those kinds of songs, which again, totally have a place, it does then make the rest of the opportunities seem, I don't know, it all starts to sound kind of like a promo.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think music supervisors and creatives in the film and TV world, and even in trailers and ads, they want real artists involved, and they want that artistry as well. So the fine line is just maybe just don't say the city. Don't say your name. Don't say your mom's name.
Yeah.
Don't make it too... Just think about the human experience more than your own personal experience all the time, and then kind of cater it more lyrically towards that. Makes it more widely applicable.
That's a great way to say it. Right towards the broader human experience as opposed to your own. And in general, that would probably have a better shot just because it's a wider possibility of uses.
Yeah. And you can still make it like an I narrative or things like that, but just stay away from anything that would be too limiting in terms of it applying to somebody else's experience as well.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting segue, because, I know a lot of people in our audience in particular kind of come from a faith-based angle, and sometimes that can be a little tricky or maybe too specific for a certain film or scene. How would you talk to somebody who's kind of coming from that side of the industry and how they can maybe get involved in the sync side of things, and what should they do?
There are a lot of faith-based projects just in general, films, TV, but if you want to make it more of like a broad pitch, the uplifting lyrics, the I believe in you, togetherness, all of those things are widely applicable in sync, always asked for. Anything emotive like that and again, a lot of what I've heard in faith-based music has a lot of the big build and the big emotions and a lot of positive themes, and those are all widely applicable. I would stay away from anything that gets too literal, just because it narrows down the opportunity. It doesn't mean it's impossible.
Yeah.
It just means it's not as widely applicable. But again, the human experience, you can talk about faith, you can talk about struggles, you can talk about all of those things, just maybe don't relate it directly to religious lyrics.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about, because you moved from LA to Nashville, first of all, does somebody, if they want to get involved in the sync world, do they have to be in a market like that, like in LA, in Nashville, or are there a lot of people who are making a career in this stuff kind of outside of these cities?
I would say it's helpful to be in cities that have the industry in them, at least initially, to just have the connections that you kind of need to be able to get in and sort of like do these sorts of deals. For post-production, like if you're going to be a music supervisor, it is helpful again to be in LA or in New York. I think it's changed since COVID. Like I do think a lot of people have transitioned to being able to be more work from home, a little bit more flexible. I know for me in trailers, we had so much security around all of the movies that we worked on. We were not allowed to have any of the media outside of our immediate desks. We had to check in drives, things like that. All of those things, it's still very highly classified. Like you have to be very, very careful, follow many, many rules. They adjusted for us to be able to work from home during that time. I think it's transitioned back into being much more in office. But for music people in those sort of circumstances, if you don't have to take any of the media, if you don't have to look at any of the picture, if you just can get a description from your producers and send the music from elsewhere, sometimes that's fine. It depends on the agency. I would say depending on what media you want to be in, if you want to be on the supervision side or if you want to be on the pitch side. Pitching is probably a little bit easier to be in multiple different cities or in different places. But if you want to be on the supervision side, I mean, it's helpful to be where the productions are happening. Yeah.
Well, and you made a good point, too. It makes sense that in the beginning of your career, it helps to be present. Mm-hmm. And then once you have those relationships, then maybe you can move back to where you're from or whatever.
Yeah. You know? I mean, I supervised for my LA projects while I was in Nashville the first year.
So you were still able to get all of the things done, but it was relationships that you had already had.
Yeah, I'd already been with them for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I knew what they meant when they said sweeping.
It's all the lingo. It's a lot of lingo. That's half the battle is just learning the lingo.
Yeah. What do they mean when they say epic but minimal?
That's a phenomenal question. That sounds like a paradox.
It truly can be. But you just get to know your producers and your editors
well, you're good at speaking. You're like a translator in many ways.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good at speaking the language. Let's talk a little bit about the business side. How does all of this, and I know this is a very broad question because as we've established, there's a lot of different ways of doing sync. But in general, how does the monetization side of things work for a creator, for an artist who is wanting to learn this world?
Well, I don't know how. I'm sure that a lot of this is already known information.
Start at a very basic level, just, no listener left behind.
There's two sides to every song. There's a master and publishing, the recording, the composition. When you're licensing a song, you have to clear them both. Unless you're just doing publishing, someone singing on camera, or it's, like lyrics set on camera or something like that.
And just to clarify that even more, master is the recording, the audio.
Yeah.
And the publishing is the song.
Yeah.
The chord, lyric, melody.
Composition, yeah. So the way we do it in sync is whoever the person is or production is that's licensing the song has to come and get permission from the writers and the artists, and they give you a media, a use, certain terms that really dictate what the deal will cost. The broader the terms, depending on if it's TV, film, ads, trailers, it can vary in price. So they'll clear both sides, and then so you get an initial licensing fee. And then in certain medias, there's royalty back end.
Yeah, there's the master side, there's publishing side, and potentially even a back end side of these things.
TV, network TV, good back end, not so much in trailers. It depends on the use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do people generally like to do kind of work for hire arrangements in that space, or is it, again, kind of... It depends.
It really depends on the project. Work for hire comes into play a lot of times, I would say, in film, if you're doing certain like soundtrack-based things, or if you're doing in advertising, it can come into play. Work for hires can get difficult if you have a publisher.
Correct.
But, with more boutique agencies that specialize in bespoke, I'm sure that there's plenty of work for hire situations. A lot of times the way that I see it, and I've seen it in trailers and in different circumstances, is they will have you do something custom, we call it custom, for a project with a kill fee involved. And so knowing that if the song or whatever you're customizing gets killed, you get paid out it's a very nominal fee. It's really just to basically like saying to you, we're paying you for your hours. And then, but the promise is that it's getting in front of the client, and if you land it, it's a really big payoff.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes those deals will end up being buyouts. Sometimes they'll end up being a license. It depends on the circumstance.
So on the business side, obviously the bigger the payout, the bigger the competition is going to be, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, like in something like trailers, like the budgets are really generally really good, especially for something that's going to be like a buyout like that. Yeah. So it's kind of like worth your while especially because we go to the same people pretty often. It's the same group of composers and people that specialize in these things. So there's a real familiarity. They know the game. They know. I don't love having multiple customs going at one time. It is unfortunately how the industry works, but...
And that's where you're kind of having like 5 different composers shoot for this same spot, essentially.
Yeah.
But in general, probably understand that that's the case,
right?
They
do. Nobody's hiding anything. But yeah, generally the payoff is substantial enough to warrant the risk.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a low-hanging fruit that's like, hey, if you're new and you want to explore the sync world, is there a category or a lane that's like the lower hanging fruit, if that makes any sense? Like maybe less competitive, but maybe less of a payoff, easier to get your foot in the door?
I would say, like, if you're really interested in sync and you're not necessarily searching for like a legitimate like publishing deal or record deal as an artist and you want to write for sync, there are companies that really just specialize in sync, and they do specialize in the writing specifically for promo, but they also represent real artists. Not to say that promo isn't real artists, right?
Sure.
But they have different medias that they focus on, so they are always looking for people, writers, artists that they can represent specifically for sync. And I can give you guys names of some of those companies, but in this industry, because there is so much music out there and there's so many ways to discover music, having a really trusted sync person, sync company that you work with, licensing company that you work with, is going to get your music to supervisors faster, because they want to be able to trust the person that is sending them the music. They want to know, oh, when I get this song from Kate, I can clear it.
Sure. Yeah.
She knows where everybody is. She can tell me what kind of... Why am I talking in third person? The person, whoever is pitching your music, knows who the other writers are, knows what budgetary constraints you'll work within, knows what you won't clear for, if you have any sensitivities to violence, politics, things like that. Most supervisors really want their very well-vetted music sent to them by very trusted sources.
Yeah, so it's going to be much better to try and build a relationship with one of those sync agencies.
Yeah.
Makes a ton of sense.
Or when you are researching labels or publishers that you're working with, if sync is a priority to you, make sure you know their sync team, how involved they are, how available they are to you, things like that. Yeah.
I love that. Lastly, before we wrap up and we get into some Q&A, for those interested in more the composition and scoring side, I know you know someone very well who's in that space.
I'm married to him. I don't know if I know him very well, but I'm married to him.
We're actually having him on here in just a few days, Alex Belcher. So he's going to definitely crack that whole world open. But maybe give us the high level overview if somebody's more of an instrumentalist and they're like, I don't actually write a lot of lyrics or top line, like the composition scoring side of things.
Yeah, it's a totally different beast. I think a lot of people think if I can structure a song, I can write to picture, and it is so different. Yeah, I mean, he can write for full orchestra, which is, you know, kind of prerequisite, I would think, for most composers. Not every composer reads music, to be honest.
Knowing how to score for an orchestral arrangement.
Yeah. He's much more of like almost like a storyteller of the entire piece. You know, he's there to emphasize the story, to find a palette, to get the right players, to get the right team, orchestrators, music editors, everyone involved in like the character that is the score for a movie or for a TV show.
And how much of it is real musicians versus, you know, nowadays the samples are so good?
Initially it's samples, and he has an endless amount of programs that I couldn't even tell you.
My version of guitars, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he plays guitar and he can get by on most instruments if they need to do something with a live instrument. But initially, you'll temp a movie with either existing score or some of his pieces of music for different things. You go through a whole process of finding where in the movie or where in the TV show is best served by what kind of cue. They're called cues.
A song or a chunk of music is cue.
Called a cue.
Yeah.
And then from there, they create their own score around it. And like throughout the different cuts of the movie or how it progresses, it changes. And you go through multiple different notes and multiple different rounds. And you eventually get to the scoring stage, which he just did one in Nashville, which was the first time he'd recorded orchestra here at Ocean Way. Usually he's in London, Abbey or Ayr. So that's where he's done most of his movies. This is fun to brag on him.
I'm sure he will not brag on himself, so this is your chance.
So what he does in those circumstances is once all the cues are approved, everything is gotten to the director, to the studio, to everybody else, they go in and they record with the different sections of the orchestra each day, and he's on the stage with them, giving them all direction in terms of he uses big words like
glissando.
Yes, and tutti and like all these other things. And then from there, they go to the dub, and then from the dub is the final mix.
Yeah.
and then you see the movie.
So that's composition in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But we'll dive into it a lot more with Alex.
Yeah, he knows way more. I stop listening sometimes when he talks. Yeah.
My wife does that with me sometimes too, so that's probably
I've been
just
on
normal.
many scoring stages for different movies. Music supervisors are part of that process, but not nearly. Like the composers, that's their world.
Yeah.
You're there for them.
You're not in the weeds as much on it.
You're there for them to make sure they're supported, that they have the musicians that they need, that they're getting the hours that they need, that the budget's coming in correctly, that, depending on if it's union or non-union, things like that. It is definitely a collaborative process, but the composers really run that ship.
Well, hey, this has been amazing info. We are going to do a little Q&A with our audience, but this was kind of the main episode. So thank you so much for lending us your knowledge and expertise. You're so good at what you do with this, and it's just such a huge blessing to our audience. So thank you for making time today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Made It in Music podcast. And be sure to check out our other episodes where we unpack hundreds of hot topics with some of the top music industry pros, both here in Nashville and all over the world. Subscribe to make sure that you automatically get future episodes, and leave us a review if you loved it. It would really help us out. Or send an email to support@fullcirclemusic.com if you have ideas for how we can improve the show. If you would like to become a Songchasers member and attend our training sessions live, head over to joinsongchasers.com to learn more. You also get additional exclusive training from music industry professionals. You get our royalty-free custom tracks from Seth Mosley. You get song reviews from me and my team, and you get access to a custom social media network we created exclusively for songwriters and musicians. There's nothing else like it on the internet. Head to joinsongchasers.com to learn how to join, and check out madeitinmusic.com for more content and episodes from this podcast. See you in the next episode.